marketers, growth managers, and business owners. You're listening to the Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast by Best Company. It's growth done right. Let's do this.
Hey, this is Todd Jensen with Best Company. Welcome to the WOMM, the Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast by Best Company, and I'll be your host today. And I am really excited to have our guest on our show today, Matt Vance. Say hello, Matt.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
Hey, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for making time. And I just want to take a second and introduce Matt because I'm really excited to have him. As you know, here on the WOMM podcast, our goal is really simple. We want to bring concrete strategies, tips, tricks that business owners and marketers can use to up their word of mouth marketing game. And no one's better at that than Matt Vance. In fact, he's a social innovator. He's the author of this book, which we'll be talking about today, The Review Cycle. And he's got some really cool, exciting stuff to share from his book. His work is, he's done all kinds of cool stuff in research around human behavior, perception, and experience design. Like, how intriguing is that as marketers to understand what our customers, what's going on in their head. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but he's built consumer and employee experience programs at multiple global organizations like iFIT and the Malouf companies. And he's consulted all kinds of companies. And Matt, it's so great to have you here today.
Hey, thank you so much. It's quite the generous intro. I'm pleased to rub shoulders with the good crew over at Best Companies, especially with you, Todd. So thanks for the chance to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here, and excited to jump in. And to start off, I wanted to give our listeners and our viewers just a little bit of taste of your background, and so help us understand just a little bit about your marketing journey and your reputation marketing journey specifically.
Yeah. So I started specifically in reputation management in 2014. It's when I graduated college at Utah State University up in Cache Valley, Utah. And I ended up getting a job at a small startup called Malouf. It's now called Malouf Companies, but they make all sorts of products. At that time, they were focused on like sheets, pillows, bed frames, bedding accessories. And I was the second hire in the e-commerce department. There were about 35 employees there at the time. And over the 6 years that I was there, it grew to 1,300 employees. So talk about some explosive growth in a few short years. But I had this very unique opportunity to lead discovery and innovation processes with online reviews, kind of a very niche area. It started with about 100 products on e-commerce sites. And by the time I left Malouf, it was over 1,500 product listings that my team was managing across 50 different e-commerce platforms. And in the middle of that was where I started working on the book, but I ended up going to another company, a fitness company, iFIT, and was able to establish their review management program as well. So in the mix, I was able to consult quite a few companies, but the majority of the experience came from those two large companies where I was very directly involved in the execution of different programs and building that up.
What interesting experience to be right on the front lines of selling products and managing the review portion of that. Anything that really stands out as far as hurdles that you've had to overcome or just interesting things you learned, coming right from college and then boom, you're immersed in the world of e-commerce and customer reviews.
Well, it was really intriguing, like being able to see everything. Like in the very beginning, I was just amazed that I could change something on a product listing and then go to Amazon or Walmart and see what I changed. Like I was able to help with some of that in the early days, and then we kind of specialized as the team grew. But it was definitely interesting just discovering things for the first time and seeing things firsthand, learning what trends were associated with increasing sales, and really seeing how reviews was one of the very key components that directly affected sales. In fact, in the book, I talk about a principle that I've developed called review elasticity. So kind of like price elasticity, principle of economics, how price affects demand. Well, I identified a trend of reviews impacting demand just like price going up and down. And it's a very exponential relationship where your demand is maximized at about 4.5 stars. And then there's this half-life that happens every half star. So about 4.0 stars is selling half of 4.5 star, and then it drops, it cuts in half again every half star. And some retail sites, I learned that they would round star ratings by half stars. And so it would artificially concentrate the demand at those half star increments instead of being a curved, like a smooth curve, I guess you could say. So it was very interesting. And the other piece on that is as you get closer to 5 stars, your demand actually drops, because like if you get too close to 5, above 4.5, because it's believed or perceived as being faked, manipulated,
too good to be true, type of. Yeah.
So that's why the cover, like right there, the image on the book, 4.5 stars, like that's kind of symbolic of like, that's where you're optimized. You don't actually want 5 stars. Now it's a little bit relative. Like if your whole category or all of your competitors are floating around 4.8, 4.9, then yeah, you want to be about there. So there's a little flex in there, but that's the general rule of thumb. You want to be at 4.5 stars.
What a cool insight that there's actually a sweet spot there, a Goldilocks zone of that 4.5, where you still look legit. There's some credibility baked into that, where if you're all the way to 5 stars, it just, maybe people's BS sensors kind of go off or something like that. How interesting. These are the kinds of insights that you get while reading the book that I've really liked, are these real world examples of things that you've gleaned. So you're at 2 different companies analyzing the way consumers behave in the sales cycle, in their purchase cycle. How do you get from there to where you're doing this to what's the spark that leads you to write a book about it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a date that's forever burned in my memory, October 3rd, 2016. That's when Amazon banned incentivized reviews. So before that, you could just give away products, and as long as a review said, I received this item for free in exchange for my feedback, it was completely FTC compliant and compliant with Amazon terms of service, and that was okay. And it was like printing money. It was nuts. Like we would just, assign maybe 10 or so people to leave a review on a new product, and it would ignite the listing, get just enough heat to where it could start taking off on its own. After that, though, it was really difficult. And that was one of the first, like the main things that I was in charge of when I first got into the review space, was assigning those sample units. After that, though, it was just like hitting my head on a brick wall. Like, what do we do? Like, it was so easy before. And that was what kind of led to this book. It was actually my wife that had the epiphany moment of, you need to write a book. But before that, it was, okay, I like to research. I like teaching people. I'd written these different processes of how we needed to operate and what we needed to do. But my wife kind of connected the dots. Like, you like researching, you like teaching people, you should like apply it to something that's a little bit more meaningful than just a few, Word documents that will never see the light of day. And I kind of at first was resistant, but then I was like, you know what? Let's try this. It ended up being a long-term project. I worked on it for about 5 years, which I'm actually glad it took that long, because I was able to iterate on the ideas over time. Like the model, the book is called The Review Cycle, but it's actually a model as well, a 4-phase consumer behavior model. And it took 6 iterations to get to the version that you'll read about in the book, to where I was able to validate, yes, this is a model that actually works in different industries for different use cases, with product, with brand, with employer reputation management. So yeah, it was that moment of Amazon banning incentivized reviews that kind of led to some soul searching, and it ended up being manifest in writing a book.
All right. Well, we can thank Jeff Bezos and those folks over at Amazon for being the impetus behind this book. Right at the beginning of the book, in the first section here, you talk about reviewer tendencies. And let's just take a moment and get inside the brain of reviewers, highlight some of those reviewer tendencies that you've highlighted in your book.
Okay. Yeah. So to anyone listening, I would challenge you to think about your own behaviors right now. If you were writing a review of something, how would you behave? In my research, I looked at 3 different variables to consider. The first is motive. What motivates someone to write a review? And I looked at a whole bunch of different articles, also looking at thousands, tens of thousands of reviews that I have personally gone through to identify some trends there. And I realized there were 2 main buckets. You've got givers and takers. Some people are looking to give back, like, hey, I've received a lot of benefit from reading reviews in the past, and so I want to pay it forward. That's actually the number one most common motive for people to leave reviews, to give back. Then you've got takers, someone who maybe they want an allowable incentive, like certain websites will give you a little promo, like maybe you get a couple dollars off your next order or something like that. And so they're looking to get some type of a value from that action.
Like, what an interesting insight. You're saying that actually that intrinsic motivation to actually give, to give back as like an expression of gratitude. Is that that's kind of a primary motive?
Definitely the primary motive that I've seen, give back to the community. The number 2 was to express one's opinion. Like they want to share what's on their mind and their vantage point on a product, a company, a service. But that's overwhelmingly the most common is to give back. And it's important to know this, because if you can get into the mind of the consumer a little bit and understand what intrinsically motivates them, then you can incorporate that into your messaging when you ask for a review, right? Instead of just saying, please write a review, you can say, you've benefited from reviews. It's your chance to pay it forward. If you'd like to leave a review, here's a link. So you can incorporate some of that insight strategically into influencing behaviors.
That is really compelling, that you'd lean on the motive of them giving back, even in your messaging. That actually makes a lot of sense. Well, thanks for getting us in the head just a little bit of reviewers. Let's get into the meat of your book here. I'm really excited about this, and this is why it's titled what it is, but the review cycle. So walk us through exactly what this cycle is.
So the review cycle is a consumer behavior model informed by online reviews. It highlights 4 steps that we all take as consumers when deciding to make a purchase. So these 4 phases probably sounds really familiar, but the first is consideration. You consider making a purchase decision. Let's say it's solar. You're thinking about buying a solar system. That's number 1. Then you start browsing online. What are the different options? Phase 2 is you engage with OGC, organizational generated content or branded content. You click into a profile or a website and you look at all the content that the company is saying about their service or their product. The third is you engage with UGC, user generated content. You want to validate a decision to either proceed or to not proceed and go back to number 1 if you want to pursue that option, that product. And then the 4th, after you've decided to buy, you have your post-decision experience. What's it like using that product or service or experiencing that solar on your home? Those are the 4 phases. Now, it's a little bit different than, say, a typical linear sales funnel going from like awareness to purchase. It's a cycle because it repeats. Like, think about it. We as consumers, we buy things more than once. And this is a really important part. Every time someone's buying something, they may be posting online, and it's actually changing the content that the next person discovers when they go through that process, that shopping journey. So the landscape of content that people are finding, both UGC and OGC, the organizational content, is constantly evolving. And so you need to acknowledge that it's this revisiting of a moving landscape, essentially. So those are the consumer phases.
I love that. So consumers are participating in that by adding in their own reviews, which then changes the landscape for the next person. You highlight something in the book that I really liked, which was maybe the expectation of the shopper at the OGC stage. where they're looking at the branded content versus the expectation in the UGC stage, the user generated content. So when I'm looking at something that the company has created, what's my expectation there versus when I'm looking at something that my co-shoppers have created?
That's a very good question, and managing expectations is absolutely critical. I talk about that in chapter 5. Actually, there's 6 chapters in the book. 4 of them are hyper focused on these 4 phases and how you can influence behaviors. Now, what you were talking about, I'll give you just one more preface that will kind of set up a better answer here, Todd. But what sets the review cycle apart from, say, a typical like a sales funnel or the item model of just going from awareness to purchase is that it's repeating, but then there's another element, and we'll make sure everyone has access to an image of this probably on the landing page or something, but there's an inside circle of 4 elements of influence. So it's one thing to understand the flow of consumer behaviors as they're going through the decision-making process. It's another thing to influence it. Now, as businesses, we don't want to just be passive. It's one thing to understand how the consumers behave. It's another thing to influence that positively. So what you're talking about, managing expectations, that directly associates with the engage with OGC content piece. Now, I'll give you just a 30-second story here. So at one point, I was helping manage a pillow. This pillow it's a reading pillow. It's got a backrest and arms on the side. It's really cushy. You're sitting there reading your book. Well, this pillow is getting a lot of negative reviews around size. It's too big. It's too small. And as we audited all the feedback in the reviews, we found that we weren't managing expectations of what the size was. So we added a new image to the pillow, to the pillow listing, the product listing, that just had measurements of the height, the size, the width, and all the negative reviews around size disappeared. Like, we didn't get any new ones. The rating went up to 4.5 stars, that magical place. And that pillow went on to be the #1 best-selling pillow in the category. So people, what I've found, and I've cited this in the book as well, is people are willing to rate higher and spend more for an experience that is expected. Like, people want to know what they're getting, even more so than you surpassing expectations. And so it's important to understand what you're delivering and then communicate exactly what you're delivering. So that does that help with that question?
That's a perfect example. And I love that. A few things that I gleaned from that is, one, that you're using this review process and the information that you're gleaning from these reviews, you're using this to adapt the buying experience, which I think is a great best practice. But then 2, you didn't change the pillow, you didn't change your product, you changed what you're communicating about it with the dimensions, and then those reviews, those expectations were now met, and the reviews go up. So a very small change that actually made for a much better user experience, and for the company, better reviews in turn. So I think that's a perfect example of how you could kind of learn and iterate based off of this feedback loop that you've got going on there. So help us understand. So you kind of have the shopping section of the cycle, right? You have those, if I understand right, those first 3 parts of the cycle. That's kind of the customer going through the shopping experience.
Yep.
Then you have them leaving the review. Let's take just a second and talk about that a little bit. You said that there's this inner circle of things the company can do to influence at each behavior. What do companies do at that 4th stage, posting the review, to actually influence the behavior?
So the 4th stage, just as you said, that's the post-purchase or the post-decision phase after someone's bought something. Now, at that point, of course, you want them to leave a review. Now, you need to understand that it's a numbers game. No matter how hard you try, not everyone will leave a review. In fact, on most e-commerce platforms, review rates will average between 0.5% to, I've seen as high as 7%. Google and Facebook is typically a lot better for local business, but it's a fraction. And so we want to ask everyone. We want everyone to have the chance. Don't be afraid of negatives because it's a numbers game. The more you ask, you'll overcome that negative minority. And you want that authenticity. I would never advocate for any type of manipulation or even trying that because it's not worth the risk. Just a side note, there was a company last year in California, a fashion company that was fined many millions of dollars for suppressing negative reviews on their own D2C site. So you need to focus on authenticity, playing by the book, understanding FTC policy, which I talk about as well. But yes, the first thing is asking for reviews. It fuels every other stage. Now, the elements of influence in the review cycle, as a business, you want to do these backwards. Now, it sounds a little weird, but you got to start at the post-purchase decision. You need to ask for reviews before you can do anything else for those other phases of consideration, engaging with OGC, engaging with UGC, and post-purchase. So the first is asking for reviews. The next thing is you want to respond to reviews. That's associated with UGC. As you respond to reviews publicly, you're showcasing a high level of care for your customer. When other people see that, especially on the negatives, it gives them almost a feeling of insurance. Like, hey, maybe it didn't go great for this one person, but look, the company's there, they're showing up, they're taking care of this person. So yeah, I feel good. I'm gonna proceed. So that's the second thing you need to consider about. And then we talked about managing expectations, harvesting insights from your reviews. That directly helps you reverse engineer your OGC, your branded content, by understanding what people are talking about, what they like and what they don't like. But then that last one, it goes to the first phase of consideration. This is the last thing you should do. It's marketing with reviews. Now, this is the top of funnel function, right? You're trying to drive traffic to your listing, your offering, and you can do that way more efficiently with UGC content than anything you could ever say. There's a study that HubSpot did where they looked at the trustworthiness of different professionals. They found that the most trusted professionals, doctors, at 49%. 49% of people trust doctors. Salespeople and marketers were at the bottom at 3%. But almost like 85% of people trust reviews as much as personal recommendations. So if you find a really good review that's talking about the right things and you put that in your ad, well, it's trust arbitrage, right? Like someone sees that and they're like, oh, I trust the community, and so I'm going to check it out. But if you're there saying, we're awesome, look at us, like we're such a cool company, it doesn't have as much influence.
That makes a ton of sense. And it's one of the backbones of what we provide here at Best Company, which is the ability to take these reviews and turn them into marketable assets. And I love what you said about the trustworthiness of a review from another shopper is actually, what did you say, 85, 80, 87%?
85% is the research I found. Yeah.
85% trust in what other people are saying versus around 50 for a doctor. So if you really want to just elevate the credibility of the buying experience, then take those reviews and incorporate them right into that shopping experience. I love that. And something else that you said that I found interesting was, hey, don't be afraid of the negative reviews. It's like, hey, you're in the customer game here, and that means you're going to get some things. And it reminded me of here's a quick 30-second story on my end, but I used to work at eBay, and reviews are obviously huge there. I mean, reviews are just everything. And I was working with some auto dealers and showing them how to use their reviews on eBay Motors. And I showed them an example of somebody's negative review in one of these trainings. And it was, it was a bad experience or something like that. It was a negative review someone had left for this auto dealer. Well, that auto dealer came in with such an authentic response and reply to that. And they just said, you know what? Yes, you're right. That was on us. Come on in and we'll make it good. We want to take care of you. And I showed that up on the screen, and there's a room full of auto dealers. And one of them from the back raised his hand and said, I want to get a negative review just so I can add that great reply, because it just oozed authenticity and, hey, we'll make right when we make a mistake. And it actually came out looking so much better that, hey, we none of us are perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes, but we're willing to make it right. And but I always thought that was funny that someone said, I actually want the negative review just so I can engage with the review, leave a reply, and show that we'll work with them. But so I love what you said about that, about really engaging and responding with those reviews. I think that can't be overstated. So
cool story, man.
You've helped us geek out a little bit on the process of reviews and inside the head of consumers, and through this nice process that we can use. Help give us some practical application now. Let's bring this down to day-to-day stuff. And first of all, where should a company start? Okay, Matt, I want to take our review game and just elevate it. Where in the world do I start?
No, that's a good question that I hear quite often. Nobody should feel embarrassed to learn something new, right? I mean, business is all about innovation in different ways, and reputation is certainly one of those elements that matters. Using feedback from your consumers and helping it improve your services, your products, it all matters, but it can be overwhelming, right? Like, holy cow, there's so many things that should be considered. I want the negative review so I can respond. I need to collect reviews. Let's simplify this. Let's just break it down to 3 easy things. So the first thing is you need to measure where you're showing up right now. You need to draw a baseline. So I call that a reputation audit. Essentially, just do a Google search and click on every single spot where you're coming up for the first 3 pages. That's a good place to start, and put all those in an Excel sheet and just mark your star rating, take a screenshot, get some easy way to just document this is where we're starting from. Now, it's important that you diversify your reputation just like you diversify financial assets, right? If you've got a portfolio for your retirement, it's going to be more stable if you have multiple different funds that you're a part of. The same is true with your reputation. So it's important to first document where you're showing up so that you know where you can start pushing content to in multiple different places as you get going. So number 1, you need to do a reputation audit. Draw the line in the sand. Number 2 is you need to start from that first piece of asking for reviews. Like, you can't do anything else with reviews if you don't have any. Like, if you're a startup, that's the first spot. Like, go to your customers, ask for reviews. Now, if you're a large company, you already have this existing reputation on the internet, then you may want to skip that for just a minute and focus on a one-time catch-up of review responses. That's a little bit more time sensitive. You've already got content that's sitting out there. You want to respond in a timely manner. So if you're a larger existing company, do that first as kind of a 2.A. And then 2.B, go back to asking for reviews. And third, I would say you need to focus on all 4 steps of the review cycle, but just realize that you're gonna learn as you go, and just remember the ABCs, always be testing. So whatever you're going to try for a review request or a review response, or reading your reviews to understand what people are saying, or putting a review in ads, just measure how it goes. And if it goes great, then do more of that. If it doesn't go great, try something different. So number 1, reputation audit, draw the line in the sand. Number 2, ask for reviews and respond to reviews if you've got existing content. And third, always be testing your approach to those 4 phases: asking for reviews, responding to reviews, harvesting insights from reviews, and marketing with reviews.
Those feel like 3 things that any of us can jump in and do. This has been fantastic. As we prepare to close here, let's say you have 30 seconds, Matt, and I come to you as a business owner, or I'm the VP of marketing at a company that wants to start taking their reputation management seriously. They want to start taking their review game seriously. What can you say as far as what's you've got 30 seconds to teach me how to improve my review game? What would you tell me?
I would say just start. Like if you're not asking for reviews, ask for reviews. Even if you don't know exactly what to say, even if you're just putting a link in an email or a text, like just sending that link will get something. And that's more than nothing. So you can always make that email better over time, but just start sending that email, start sending those review requests. So I would say just start. You can improve your approach over time.
This has been great. Not only did you lay out the actual scaffolding that we can build our review efforts around, but you've actually given us some nice concrete places to start and some things that we can do. Help our viewers and our listeners, Matt, understand if they want to learn more, how can they get their book? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah. So you can find the review cycle on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's on quite a few different sites online. You can also go to thereviewcycle.com and get more info there. We'll soon be launching a free plus shipping offer for the book. So you can check for that. And then follow me online on LinkedIn as well. But I do got to say one thing that's really kind of fun. If you're going to get into the review game, you got to make it exciting. I would recommend to everyone out there to start a review hall of fame. So keep a document when you find the funny reviews or something interesting, like add it to that, like, because it brings some entertainment to the whole sphere of running a review management program. People say crazy stuff, and there's still tons of ones that I cite to people, and it keeps it lively for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. And this is something just off the top of your head, Matt, your favorite review you've ever seen, anything that's made you chuckle or has gotten your attention.
There was one that said, this pillow feels so soft, like I'm sleeping on a panda bear. And there was another one that was, this mattress topper feels like I'm resting in a bowl of butter from one of Paula Deen's recipes.
That's great. That's great. You give your customers that voice, and sometimes that can be pretty entertaining voice to hear. So that's fantastic. Matt, it's been a pleasure. You've been great. Thanks for walking us through not just the components of your book, but a little bit of your background and giving us some things that we can take and we can run with to up our review game a little bit. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Hey, to everybody else, thanks for listening. We'll have notes in the description about how to get Matt's book. And so check it out. It's a great read and something that you can have on your desk and refer to time and time again for, to really take your review game, to the next level there. But thanks again, Matt. And thanks for everybody for joining the Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast by Best Company. And we'll be talking to you soon.
We know you're busy. So from us at Best Company, thank you for listening to the Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. Want to leverage more concrete strategies, real-life examples, and practical tools? Then hit that subscribe button for growth done right.